So welcome everyone to to Digital Vino today. It's not Winesvittel, it's Digital Vino. And today I have Andrea Lemieux with me, and we're just going to do a short intro, and then we will be back to talk more about Turkish wine. Okay, so welcome, Andrea. It's very cool that you're here, and that it was very nice to read your book. I haven't, of course, read all of it because I didn't have time, but do you want to present yourself and tell us a bit about who you are and how you ended up in Turkey?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, first, thank you for having me. I arrived in Turkey almost 9 years ago. It'll be 9 years next week. I came for an unrelated to wine job, which I still do. I have a normal day job. And I really developed my wine interest while living in Turkey, which a lot of people find to be kind of odd. And it really happened because I was seeing all these grape names. I had no idea what they were or how to say them, and started drinking the wine and getting more and more interested in Turkish wine, in the grapes, and then in wine generally. So I started doing a lot of self-study. I've taken WSET 1 and 2, and I am working my way through Unit 2 now of the Wine Scholar course and yeah, about maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. Gosh, it both feels like a really long time ago and not at all a long time ago. I started researching to write a book about Turkish wines because I couldn't really believe that there wasn't a more updated version of one. And yeah, this is where we are now.
No, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I had a look through it, and I think it's very kind of comprehensive. So I wanted to ask you also, how did you? I mean, you said a bit that you started writing the book because you realized that there hadn't been anything written about Turkish wine for a long time. But if you could say something about how you actually more practically got into writing this book. I mean, how did you, from the idea to starting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd come home from holiday somewhere where I'd been to a few of their vineyards and bought their, wines from this country book, and came home and was, I don't know, looking through the book and thinking, wow, why doesn't Turkey have this? This is a country built for tourism and for gastronomy and wine, and why don't we have this? And I kind of sat around for a few months, assuming that one of the Turkish wine bloggers or somebody here in the industry was working on it, and didn't see anything coming out, didn't see any announcements. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do it. And got together with a friend of mine who I met in Turkish class, actually, Emma Aslıhan Bashir Rose. She was my research partner. She's a food historian and a professional baker. We started just contacting wineries and visiting them, doing the research. She's also my photographer. She did almost all of the beautiful images in the book. And after a few years of writing, I found a graphic designer, Başak Gürtliç, who works under, hi, Evelyn, has her own company, Empathia Creative, and I started working with her designing the infographics. And when I realized that I really was going to be self-publishing the book and would have complete artistic control, I was like, have you ever designed a book? Would you like to? And she never had before, and this is what she came up with. And I mean, she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant.
No, I think it's great. It's also very how do you say, personal to you. You can see that you put your own personality into the whole book, which is quite impressive, I think.
Thank you.
So what was the next question I wanted to ask? So if you look more than on the Turkish wine world and what you write about, so for a person who hasn't read the book yet, I mean, what do you think are the main particularities of Turkish wine? I mean, of course, it has a long history, but through your studies now and writing the book, what do you think is the main traits of?
I mean, we have so much. There are a lot of Turkish wines that are produced from grapes that we all know. There's a lot of Cabernet here. There's a lot of Chardonnay here. They make some amazing Sauvignon Blanc here in Turkey. But for me, the real particularities of Turkish wine and what the biggest selling point is the native grapes here. There are so many of them, and there's some research being done into how many there actually are. There are only maybe 40, 45 that are currently being used in wine, but I mean, once you get past how to pronounce them, because they can be pretty difficult to say. I mean, this is a whole new world of wine for people to discover, and grapes that are produced almost entirely only here. So I mean, yeah, that's where I am with it.
But if we look at, because I know you also write in several places that the Bordeaux style, which is very kind of strong still, which is also, I think, when I went to Hungary, there's also very into OT Bordeaux style.
Yeah.
And in Hungary, it's a very domestic market because it's very expensive wines, and of course they couldn't compete on an international market. How do you see in Turkey? Is it mainly an domestic market for these kind of wines, or do they also sell abroad?
There is some export, not as much as I would like to see. And a lot of it, I think, my personal opinion is because so many wineries are pushing their own Bordeaux blends, but they're competing with not only Bordeaux, but every other country on earth that makes
Yeah.
Bordeaux. I've joked with other American bloggers about this, about how much Americans are afraid of the umlaut. And yeah, we don't have Hungarian grapes. It's not like trying to pronounce Keknel U. But Kuzguzu and Boaz Kere, those are a little hard to wrap your mouth around. So personally, I think the export market would be more interested in native grapes.
Yeah.
And there are a number of wineries that are really trying to push it. Vinkara, which is an Ankara-based winery, works with a lot of native grapes. Paşeli, which I think is one of the heroes of native grape promotion. He is huge in, I mean, not only promoting his own wine, but just Turkish wines in general. And you can find a lot of the native grapes that they produce abroad. So I think that the market is building, but it is currently mostly domestic.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So, I mean, when you started traveling around the wineries and the different regions, how was the reception? I mean, what did they think about your work in the beginning to write this book?
There is such a culture of hospitality in Turkey. And then on top of which you had the two foreign girls. Emma, thank God, her Turkish is far better than mine, so she really helped carry a lot of the conversations. And we were in such small villages sometimes in wineries barely anyone in Istanbul had heard of, and I think they were blown away by the fact that we'd heard of them and we wanted to talk to them. But for the most part, the reception was very warm, very welcoming, very, what do you need? We're happy to help provide. This is a really interesting thing that you're trying to do. And they really wanted us to be successful, which was very helpful.
Okay, that's great. So there's a question from Robin. So she wonders if you speak about areas and climate for grape growing in Turkey and the primary areas to look for.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a contentious question because Turkish wineries, from what I've experienced, seem to organize themselves geographically as opposed to climatically. But for my book, I did things climatically. So I took a few people outside of the regions that I think they have long associated themselves with. There are a number of different growing climates. I mean, Turkey is a huge country, and there is a big chunk of it that's inland. But we also touch the Aegean, the Marmara Sea, the Black Sea, the Mediterranean. So there is a lot of like Mediterranean climate influence, as well as a little bit of oceanic influence. So there's kind of everything that you can imagine here, and we also have a lot of Shay, what do you call it? Altitude.
Okay, altitude. I thought it was like some kind of plant or something.
Yeah. So you kind of start in the northwest, where Thrace is, near the borders of Bulgaria and Greece, and it's very continental there. There's a lot of snow. It's very cold, and then as you kind of go south and east, it starts getting warmer, and depending on exactly where in the country, either wetter or drier. And it's just kind of all over the place, and it's a little hard to pinpoint really what anything is. So I'm sorry, Robin, that was a terrible answer.
Well, I mean, I guess it's also kind of. I mean, I was thinking about that when I read through the book. I mean, that there's so huge distances, and so I mean, one area is by the Black Sea, then of course the Thrace, how do you say it? Thrace, and then the Anatolian, and then you have the very far south. So I mean, of course, the terroir and the climate is so diverse, so it's also difficult to speak about. So there's another question. I think we're getting to the wine markets a bit further on. So Robin says she was happy with the answer.
Thank you, Robin. It's very kind.
So if we're going to talk a bit about the grapes, I mean, do you see that there is any grapes, the native grapes, that you think will be more successful than others, or?
I do, and interestingly, I think some of the ones that can be more successful are the ones that are actually not worked with quite as much here. There's one grape that I have recently developed a love affair with called Çalkarası. It's kind of a Cinderella grape, I think, for Turkey. It has long been a bit of a workhorse, and either gets put into a blend to make up a percentage, and they don't really talk about it. But in the last few years, we're seeing it more and more, mostly thanks to this winery, Paşeli, who makes a really beautiful red wine with it. This newest vintage from them is really incredible. He does several different rosés, a Blanc de Noir, and last year they released 2 pet nats with this grape. And it's really showing what kind of flexibility it has. And it's not one of these red wines that's going to completely overwhelm you. It's more light medium bodied. It's very food friendly. It's really drinkable. And I think this is going to be a fantastic grape, I think. I mean, I'm very excited about this grape, and I really hope people start paying attention to it.
So if we go back to the interviewees or the wineries, Julie wants to know something about the high taxation on alcohol and the winery's own comments on this.
There was some I mean, there's always going to be conversations about taxation here, and in Turkey, we go through several price increases throughout the year, and we've just had the New Year price increase. And then on top of the falling lira, I mean, the wine prices right now for the local market are insane. And so, yes, the taxes have certainly come up, but almost more than that is the fact that wineries here have to buy almost all of their equipment. And I mean, yes, obviously barrels come from abroad, but not just barrels, everything else comes from Europe. And so they have to pay for these in euro, regardless of what the heck the lira is doing. And the lira has not been terribly stable the last few years. And it's really that almost more than the taxes that are driving the prices up.
So Evelyn asked by insane if you could give an example. I don't know if you can give anything.
Okay, so actually really good real life example. I just gave a wine tasting last Saturday. And the overwhelmingly favorite wine was from a winery called Vinkara. It was their reserve level Boaz Kere, which I used to pay, give or take, 200 Turkish lira for, which, oh shoot, math.
Let's do the conversion. Turkish
Where's my
lira
calculator?
to euro.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
let's
I
see.
mean, what is that, about 13 euros, $15?
Yeah, about 14.
Okay, yeah.
15.
Which is not a huge amount of money for those of us, making international salaries. But here, that's already like a medium high expensive wine. With the new price increases, both because it is the annual price increase and because of inflation, that wine now retails for 415 Turkish liras,
Which is
more
a
than
double.
twice. Yeah, more than twice what it was before.
Yeah.
So this is what I mean by insane. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a
and
lot. I mean, that's a.
it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it's kind of worth it. It's a pretty fabulous wine, but for the local market, it's really a wrench to pay for something like that.
Yeah. So I was also, when we were talking about trends also before, Evelyn says that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you see that's still? I mean, you talked about the pet nat, and you also talked about organic wine in the book. So do you see that the more trends that you see also all over the world in Europe and US is coming also in Turkey, or do they still focus more on Bordeaux?
No, I think a lot of wineries, thank God, are shifting away from Bordeaux, and there are more and more wineries focusing now on native grapes, both kind of the more well-known native grapes as well as like rediscovering grapes that have kind of lain dormant for so long. And with winemaking styles, we have, I think, just about everything under the sun. We have at least one vegan certified winery, even. A lot of the
Okay.
wineries here farm organically. And that's been a thing for quite a while, actually. Like even before I really got into wine, I remember seeing labels saying made with organic grapes. We had amber wines and amphora aged wines for a long time. Uh, and the pet nat is just kind of the newest one. So yeah, the winemakers here are very keen to experiment, and if not, I mean, I hate to say that they're following trends because it make it sound like they're not taking initiative, but they're really all to see what they can do and to see what the
Yeah.
great can do.
But do they have anything you like? Because I mean, they're still close to the older traditions. When you start to book about the historical background, so do they have this kind of like they have the Trevri in Georgia that they dig into the ground? Do they have that kind of tradition too, or?
Traditionally, no. There is actually a winery that does that. There's a winery called Gelvidi, which is out near kind of our famous Cappadocia region. And Udo Bey, who he's actually German, he learned how to make wine in Georgia, and then he settled here in Turkey. It's a really fascinating guy. So that's what he does. He sources ancient amphora from across Turkey, and they do
Okay,
everything kind of Georgian style. I think his
that's cool.
youngest amphora is like 150 years old or something. Um, but historically, I think it's because, I mean, my opinion, it's because there have been so many different peoples who have come through this area that it's really hard to. I mean, there's been that kind of unbroken winemaking history, but not by the same people. So not with the same
Okay,
method
now that's
culture. Yeah.
well, Turkey is a kind of a split country like that too.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah.
okay, so let's when we talk about this, let's go to Evelyn's questions. How do you see the Muslim influence in Turkey when it comes to wine? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, thanks for asking the easy questions, Evelyn. Um, I mean, you can definitely see it in the government. This is a conservative government, and it has certainly affected the wine industry in ways that I mean, so there is no government support. It's not like the countries like Hungary and Greece and Georgia, where there's, even if not financially, there's, you know, so much behind the wine industry in marketing. Here it's been illegal to advertise alcohol full stop since 2013. And that is, I think, part of the religious conservatism. It's also very difficult to get your winery registered. And there's so much behind the scenes that I don't even know about, that when we talk to people, we really didn't want to get into the political weeds of asking some of these questions. We did when we first started, and then it was like, okay, you know, we need to back off some of these. So it's.
When do you think the kind of modern winemaking more or less started in Turkey? I mean, when did they get on the?
I would say started in the 30s or 40s.
Okay.
So this would have been after the population exchange, during which Turkey lost most of its winemakers because they were the Greek population. And it really started with some of the Ataturk, for one, established a vineyard in Ankara.
Okay.
And then you had some of these older families, like the families behind still working wineries, Doluca and Kutman, who went to Europe and learned how to make wine and brought back grapes, because they'd also been hit really hard by phylloxera at some point here. Later than Europe, for a very brief moment, it's one of my favorite trivia things, for a very brief moment, the Ottoman Empire was one of the biggest exporters of wine, because Europe had been decimated and they still had wine here. So yeah, right around the 30s and 40s, I think, is when the modern industry started.
Do you see that there's been any, I mean, we talked about organic before, and do you see that during the 2000s now there's been some kind of change of pace towards producing more?
Change of pace. I don't know. I think people are more aware of how marketable organic is. In a lot of cases, it has seemed to me that organic is just kind of the way they work.
Okay.
It's their default setting. But because of what's happening in other markets, they're really seeing that this is a selling point, and are being more obvious about putting things on their labels about how they work with organic grapes or something.
Okay, that makes sense. There was another question. Let me find it. How many wineries are there approximately in Turkey? Asks Evelyn.
Yes, there are. Oh, I know the answer to this.
I think you wrote somewhere, but I can't remember.
I want to say about 180, give or take, registered wineries in Turkey. But it's a little bit of a tricky number, because my understanding is that any time you, for example, like a large winery that has multiple facilities around the country, you have to register each one of those. So 180 is a little bit of a false number. Yeah, it's not that many. I feel like the U.S., like individual states, probably have a lot more than that, but they are they're really trying to make up for the lack of quantity with the quality wine that they're producing now.
Okay. Then there was another question. Let's see if we find that one before. I think it was also from Evelyn. I think it was about the market. So where Turkish wine, where you can find it around the world, where do they export?
Yep. I think the biggest markets are Australia, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands. There is some interest in Hong Kong, and there's a little bit in Taiwan even. North America is less, which makes me sad, but there are a few wineries that are still really trying to get their wine there. And I've talked to a couple people over the last year who are working on getting their import licenses and dealing with all of that red tape so that they can import more Turkish wines to the US at least. yeah. So and then a little bit here and there throughout Europe. Um, Not easy to find. You should come and taste here.
Oh, we should do a wine tasting kind of online with Turkish wines. That would be cool.
Yeah.
So when you wrote this book, which were the biggest challenges and which were the biggest rewards?
Uh,
Any anecdotes or any?
yeah. Biggest rewards definitely were visiting these wineries and meeting all these people. Is not something I would have done without the book pushing me, because I mean, I'm not a great driver and I absolutely hate to drive, but I had to suck it up and do it. And there's not a way to see most of these places without doing that. And I have seen, for one thing, such incredible places in Turkey that normal people I don't think go, and met such interesting folks. And the challenges, yeah, it was
Driving.
frustrating that the driving, the driving. But Emma, my research partner photographer, is great. She makes great playlists, and she was a pretty decent navigator. So we
Okay.
survived. But God, challenges. Just it was trying to juggle this and my day job and my regular website. Of course, that was a challenge. I mean, my mind melting sometimes at getting up at 3 in the morning to get on an airplane, to get into a car, drive 3 hours, and then interview somebody in Turkish. That just there were days my mind just kind of shut down. So
When did you start on the book? Which how many years back? When did you start?
oh gosh, I think it's it's been at least 5 years, I think.
Okay.
And a lot of that time I regret, because I think a lot of it was wasted. Like I spent about 6 months almost after I'd finished the entire book trying to interest a traditional publisher before I realized that self-publication was my only route. And I'm really glad I went the self-publication route, but I also really regret the time that I could have been doing other things.
Yeah. No, that's true. So I don't see any more questions. Let's see. How do you see the future of Turkish wine? What do you think will be? Do you see
Oh,
any openings? What they could do? What could happen?
yeah. I mean, I would, I know what I would like it to be. I certainly think that, based on the popularity over the last few years of, say, Georgian wine, and the reemergence of Hungarian wine onto the market with their native and often difficult to say grapes, really means that there is a space for new grapes and new kinds of wine. Um, there are a number of wine shows that happen in Turkey, and I would love to see more international people attending those and maybe helping build up interest in an export import market. But I think without a bigger push to export the wine, that the industry has a more difficult road ahead.
Mm. No, that makes sense. I mean, it's not an easy government either. So I mean, it's not that.
It's not. It's not. And whether or not a different government would be any kinder or any more supportive, I mean, I have no idea. Uh,
No,
but
that's
I
true.
think the interest and the drive needs to come from outside Turkey, to
Yeah.
really push people to realize that they could be successful on an international market.
No, that makes sense. So anyone who has any more questions, feel free to ask them, or else if you want to jump in, I can give you the link. I don't know, anything you want to add that you think is important to know about your book or Turkish wine? And
Well, about the book, I would just like to say that The Essential Guide to Turkish Wine is available on Amazon globally. If you are in Turkey, it's available in a number of different physical stores, Don't buy it from Amazon Turkey, because for some reason it's like 5 times the price on Amazon Turkey than it is anywhere else. Don't know how that happened. And about Turkish wine, just, doesn't matter if you feel that you can't say the grape, get out there and start asking for Turkish wine and trying it, because if you've heard anything about Turkish wine, it probably was not complimentary. And from what I've heard from people, like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was not very good. But a lot has changed in the last 10 years, and it's really worth trying again.
Yeah, no, I guess, I mean, also in most countries since 2010 or even later, there's been a lot of changes going on.
A lot of changes.
So
And
I'm
one of
dropping the link to my newsletter in the comments, and also the link to Amazon. So, well,
Thank you.
so you can buy Andrea's book if you want to.
Yes.
Okay, that
Well, and
didn't
one
work.
thing that I will say that is really cool about the Turkish wine industry that I don't think a lot of people know is how big the involvement of women in the Turkish wine industry is. And that is not something that a lot of countries can say. But here we have so many women-owned wineries, women winemakers. It's almost always women who work the harvests. I talked to a couple of wineries about this, and they said, yeah, we've tried hiring men a few times, but they just sit and have tea all day. But the women show up and work. So you almost always see women in the
pretty
field.
cool, though.
It is really very cool, and there are so many talented female winemakers here, and a lot of them are young. A lot of them are younger than I am, and I mean, I don't think I'm that old, but it makes me feel ancient to see these young women sitting around making really incredible wines.
That's very interesting. I didn't think about asking about that, because I kind of took for granted it would be more men than women.
Right. And Emma and I did at the start as well. And one of the things that we asked women whenever we encountered them in the interviews was, what is it like to be a woman in a wine industry in this country? And for the most part, they all just kind of shrugged at us, and they were like, it's not that big a deal. Like, we need the men to lift stuff sometimes, but it seems that they get discriminated against, that there's not it's more one woman told us that it was more her choice of the grapes that she planted that people criticized her for, as opposed to being a woman. Like, it was like, what are you insane? You can't plant that grape. You have to plant Bordeaux grapes, because Bordeaux grapes make you successful. And she's like, no, I'm going to do my own thing.
That's very interesting, because I mean, the whole world is now focused on women, and to give them a space, and then you go to the country you think would be more kind of discriminating, and then the women are kind of not even thinking about
absolutely.
it. Well, that's interesting. So, any more questions before I think we start to round this interview up? It's been very interesting, and I must say that the book you sent me, or the copy was, I really enjoyed it a lot, and I also, of course, I'm adored with native grapes, so I kind of went like, there's no grape I even know about here, but so I think it would be really a lot of fun to read more about that. And so yeah, if you want to learn more about Andrea, I mean, you can. I'll post the link to her website also in the comments in a while. And the link to the Amazon to buy the book is there. Yeah, agreed, Robin. It was really a lot of fun to learn more.
Yes, we need that TARDIS.
So I hope to see you again sometime. Hopefully here at some wine event or
yes. I hope I can make it sometime soon to see you there.
And I hope to also be able to taste Turkish wine soon somewhere. So thank you again for participating, and
thank you for having me.
good luck with your book and with everything else. And see you soon. And thank you everyone for joining. And next week we will actually have a winemaker from Lazio who is producing very obscure grapes that I didn't know anything about until earlier this year either. So that's going to be interesting. So see you next Wednesday. And thanks again, Andrea.
Thank
And
you.
see you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.